She stood near the back of the building, unsure if she had walked into the right place. The hall was larger than she imagined, with high walls and soft lights that made everything feel important. The sound of quiet talking floated through the room. People sat in neat rows, dressed well, holding programs in their hands. She felt small standing there, holding her worn bag close to her chest. Inside that bag were thin music sheets, folded many times, and a past filled with long nights and quiet hopes. She had almost turned around at the door. Her feet had paused, her heart beating fast, telling her she did not belong there. Places like this were meant for people who arrived with confidence, people who were announced, people whose names were known. She was none of those things. She was just someone who loved music more than anything else. Still, something inside her pushed her forward, one step at a time. The piano was placed at the center of the stage. It was black and shining, resting under the lights like it was waiting for someone important. She had played many pianos before, some with broken keys, some out of tune, some so old they creaked when touched. But this one looked different, clean, powerful, untouched. Seeing it made her hand shake slightly. Not from fear, but from respect. People barely noticed her as she moved closer. A few eyes glanced her way, then quickly looked away. Some whispered, not cruel words, just curious ones. Who is she? Is she lost? Is she part of the staff? No one thought she was a performer. She did not look like one. Her clothes were simple, chosen for comfort, not for show. Her shoes were old but clean. Her hair was tied back neatly, the way she always did when she needed to focus. She found an empty seat near the side and sat down quietly. Her bag rested on her lap. She could feel her heart in her chest, steady but heavy. Memories filled her mind without asking permission. A small room at home. A keyboard with keys that stuck sometimes. Neighbors complaining about noise. Long breaks between practice because work came first. Music had always waited patiently for her, never leaving, even when life became loud on the stage. Other performers were introduced. Each one walked confidently, bowed politely, and played with skill. The audience clapped after every performance. She listened carefully, not with jealousy, but with deep attention. She respected every note played. She knew how much effort it took to reach that level. Still, she felt something missing. Not skill, but feeling. Many performances were perfect, but they did not speak to her heart the way music once did when she was younger. Time passed slowly. She checked the clock on the wall and realized she had been sitting there longer than planned. Her palms were slightly sweaty now. The idea she had carried with her all day started to feel heavier. Asking to play was not part of the schedule. She knew that. But she also knew that chances do not always come when invited. Sometimes they appear only when asked for. She looked at the piano again. The lights reflected off its surface, almost like it was calling to her. She imagined placing her fingers on the keys. She imagined the first sound filling the room. The thought made her throat tighten, not because she feared failure, but because she feared regret. Leaving without trying would hurt more than being refused. She stood up slowly, her legs feeling stiff. As she walked toward the side of the stage, she felt eyes on her again. Some people leaned back in their seats. Others looked confused. She stopped near an organizer who stood holding a clipboard. Her voice almost failed her, but she spoke anyway, softly and respectfully. She asked if she could play. Not a full piece. Just a short moment. 10 seconds. Her words were simple, honest, and calm. The organizer looked surprised. He glanced at her clothes, then at the piano, then back at her face. There was no anger in his eyes, only doubt. He hesitated, unsure how to respond. Around them, a few people noticed the conversation. Some raised their eyebrows. A quiet tension formed in the air. This was not how things were supposed to go. Performers were chosen ahead of time. Rules existed for a reason. Letting a stranger play felt risky. What if she wasted time? What if she embarrassed herself? What if she embarrassed everyone else? She stood there without defending herself. She did not explain her past or her struggles. She did not speak about how many years she had practiced in silence. She did not say how many times she had failed before. She simply waited. Her eyes were steady, not demanding, just hopeful. Inside her mind, memories continued to rise. A broken piano bench at home. Fingers practicing in the dark so she would not disturb anyone. Learning music by listening instead of reading because lessons were too expensive. Music had never been easy for her, but it had always been honest. She trusted it more than words. The organizer took a breath. He looked toward the audience, then toward the stage manager. There was a brief exchange of looks. Time felt stretched. A few seconds passed, but for her, it felt much longer. She prepared herself for rejection. She told herself she would accept it quietly and leave with dignity. Finally, he nodded slightly. Just once. Not a smile, not excitement, but permission. 10 seconds, he repeated, making it clear there would be no more. She nodded back, grateful beyond words. Her chest felt lighter, but her hands shook again as reality settled in. She walked toward the piano. Every step echoed in her ears. The hall felt different now. Quieter. Expectant. Some people crossed their arms. Others leaned forward slightly, curious despite themselves. A few looked bored already, convinced this would be nothing special. She reached the piano bench and stopped. For a moment, she did not sit. She placed her bag gently on the floor beside her. She looked at the keys, clean and white, waiting. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished surface, reminding her that this moment was real. She sat down slowly. The bench was firm beneath her. She adjusted her position, the way she always did, careful and familiar. Her fingers hovered above the keys but did not touch them yet. She closed her eyes for a brief second. In that silence, her entire journey came together. Every late night, every doubt, every small victory that no one clapped for. She was no longer thinking about the audience or the rules or the time limit. She was thinking about why she started playing in the first place. Because music understood her when nothing else did. She opened her eyes. The room was so quiet now that she could hear her own breathing. Somewhere in the crowd, someone coughed softly, then stopped. The air felt heavy, like everyone was waiting for something. Even if they did not know what, her fingers lowered toward the keys, and just before the first note was played, she allowed herself one final thought. No matter what happened next, she had shown up. She had chosen courage over comfort. That alone meant something. Then her hands touched the piano. In the moment she had been waiting for, her entire life was about to begin. The room was filled with quiet, whispers as she adjusted herself on the piano bench. The audience shifted in their seats, some leaning forward, others sitting back with arms crossed. Many were unsure why she had been allowed to play. She could feel their doubt, almost as if it pressed on her shoulders, heavy and tangible. But she tried to ignore it. Music had always been her refuge, her way of speaking when words were not enough. Now, it had to be her strength. She took a deep breath, feeling her chest rise and fall slowly. Her fingers hovered over the keys, ready to play, yet paused. The first note seemed important, almost sacred. She had imagined this moment countless times in her small room, alone with her worn keyboard and dim lamp. Each imagined performance was perfect in her mind, but this was real. The hall was large, the lights were bright, and the audience was waiting. It was more than she had ever dared to hope for. She glanced briefly at the faces in the crowd. Some looked curious, others skeptical. A few seemed slightly annoyed at the interruption of their planned program. She did not know any of them, and yet she felt a strange connection. Each person would hear the music she carried inside her, even if only for a short time. She had 10 seconds. 10 seconds to speak without words. To share what she had kept silent for years. Her fingers finally touched the keys lightly, producing a soft sound that echoed in the hall. It was not loud, not powerful yet, but it was honest. She could feel her heart racing, and for a moment, she almost froze. The doubt returned, whispering questions. Was this enough? Would they care? Would they understand? She shook her head slightly, reminding herself that music was never about others' approval. It was about truth. The soft note grew into a short melody, flowing gently from her hands. She closed her eyes, letting the sound guide her. Memories appeared in her mind: late nights at home, the patience of fingers learning each key, the times she had cried silently when her progress felt slow. Each memory added weight to her playing, giving it depth and feeling. The audience could not see her history, but somehow it came through in her music. From the side, a few people started to lean forward. Their curiosity replaced initial doubt with quiet attention. A woman near the front moved slightly in her seat, as if instinctively feeling the rhythm. A man in the back folded his arms and uncrossed them, his brow raised in interest. Even the organizer, who had hesitated at first, seemed to relax slightly, watching more closely now. Something was changing in the room, almost imperceptibly, yet powerfully. Her hands moved more confidently, the first nerves giving way to focus. She could hear the resonance of the piano filling the hall, the vibration moving through the floor and into the audience's hearts. She imagined each note like a message, each chord a story. She did not think about technical perfection. She did not think about applause or recognition. She played because she had to, because it was the only way to speak fully. 10 seconds felt longer than expected. Each moment stretched, giving her more time than she realized to express herself. The melody she played was simple, but it carried everything: years of effort, nights of quiet practice, the joy and pain intertwined in her journey. Her breathing became part of the rhythm, her heartbeat a silent accompaniment to the notes. The audience grew quieter still. The murmurs and whispers faded completely, leaving only the sound of the piano and her presence. Some held their hands together, some rested their chins in their hands, and some simply stared at the keys in awe. The music seemed to draw them closer, bridging the gap between performer and listener. In that moment, the room ceased to be a hall of strangers and became a shared space of feeling. She almost forgot the time limit. 10 seconds was a short space, yet it seemed to stretch indefinitely when filled with emotion. Each note carried intention, each pause added weight. She could feel the energy of the audience shifting. The skepticism that had greeted her entry was melting away, replaced by wonder and anticipation. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer an outsider. She was part of something larger, even if only for a fleeting moment. When the 10 seconds neared its end, she allowed the melody to taper gently, softening into silence. The final note lingered in the air, as if reluctant to leave. She opened her eyes slowly, her gaze moving across the audience. For the first time, she saw expressions that reflected more than surprise. There was a quiet respect, almost disbelief, but genuine. People were moved. She could sense it in the way they leaned forward, in the small smiles that appeared, in the attentive posture that replaced earlier restlessness. The organizer, standing to the side, exhaled deeply. His initial doubt had given way to appreciation, though he did not yet know how to express it. Some performers whispered quietly to each other, sharing their own astonishment in hushed tones. The woman who had leaned in first now sat straighter, eyes wide, clearly impressed. The man in the back nodded slightly to himself, as if acknowledging a rare talent he had not expected. She remained seated for a few moments, allowing the resonance of the final note to fade completely. The room seemed suspended in that silence, holding on to the moment before reality returned. Her hands rested on the keys, trembling slightly from the intensity of emotion and concentration. It was not fear that made them shake, but the overwhelming awareness that she had touched something important, something real. Even as the audience absorbed what they had just heard, she felt a shift within herself. The fear and doubt that had accompanied her into the hall were gone, replaced by a quiet certainty. Music was not just a part of her life. It was her voice, her truth, her gift. The piano, the hall, the audience, all of it was secondary to the connection she had made in that brief time. It did not matter if no one else ever recognized it again. She had proven to herself that her talent, her passion, her persistence had meaning. A few people began to clap softly at first. The sound was hesitant, as if unsure what to do with such unexpected brilliance. Then, like ripples across water, more hands joined in. Applause grew steadily, not loud and boisterous, but heartfelt. She allowed herself a small smile, feeling gratitude but not arrogance. The recognition was welcome, yet she knew this was not the ultimate goal. The music itself, the act of creating and sharing it, was enough. As she stood, she noticed how differently the audience now regarded her. Some faces were still surprised, still processing, but the earlier skepticism had vanished. She carried herself with a new confidence, not born of pride, but of quiet accomplishment. Her journey, the struggles, the small victories, and the long nights had all led to this. For a moment, she allowed herself to savor it, walking off the stage. She received a few polite nods and smiles from those who had initially doubted her. The whispers continued, but now they were filled with admiration and curiosity rather than judgment. People were asking quietly who she was, where she had come from, and how she had learned to play with such feeling. She did not answer immediately. She simply walked with steady steps, her heart still pounding but calm, knowing that her moment had made a difference. Backstage, she leaned against the wall for a moment, breathing in slowly. The adrenaline of performing, even for 10 seconds, was fading, leaving behind a sense of clarity and peace. She knew that more challenges would come, that recognition would not be guaranteed. But she also knew that she had taken the first step. She had shown courage in the face of doubt, and that courage had spoken louder than any words ever could. Her thoughts drifted to the small keyboard at home, the worn music sheets folded and tucked in her bag, the countless hours spent practicing in silence. All of it had been worth it. Each struggle, each moment of frustration, each time she had almost given up everything had led her here. And she knew, deep inside, that this was only the beginning. Music would continue to guide her, challenge her, and connect her to the world in ways she could not yet imagine. The room behind her slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Performers continued, announcements were made, and the event carried on. But something had changed. The audience had seen something unexpected, a spark of talent that had been hidden until now. And she had felt the power of music in its purest form, the ability to touch hearts in mere moments, to speak truths that words could never capture. She smiled quietly to herself. The memory of the 10 seconds already burning bright in her mind, she knew she would remember this day forever, not for the applause, not for the attention, but for the undeniable confirmation that her passion, her skill, and her heart had found their voice. The piano had listened, the music had spoken. She had been brave enough to answer. As she returned to the stage for the next moment, the hall seemed quieter than before. The applause had faded, but something remained in the air, a sense of expectation that she had never felt in her life. People were watching her now, not with skepticism, but with curiosity, as if they were waiting to see what she could do next. She felt a mix of nervousness and excitement, a strange balance that pushed her forward rather than holding her back. She approached the piano once more, her fingers lightly brushing the keys before sitting down. She did not need to think about her movements. They had become familiar through countless hours of practice. The keys responded beneath her touch, solid and alive. Carrying the weight of the music she had prepared in her mind and heart, this was more than a performance. It was a conversation between her and the instrument, silent dialogue that only she could fully understand. The audience leaned in slightly, sensing that this moment was different from the rest. The first 10 seconds had surprised them, but now they were ready for more. She began with soft notes, letting them flow gently across the room. Each sound was intentional, a deliberate choice, shaped by experience, emotion, and imagination. She allowed herself to lose track of time, letting the music guide her fingers as much as her mind guided the music. With each passing moment, her confidence grew. The initial fear that had accompanied her arrival now felt distant, placed by a focused energy that ran from her fingertips through the piano and into the room. She felt the presence of every person in the audience, but she did not play for them. She played with them, sharing a part of herself in a language that needed no translation. Her movements were fluid, her expression calm yet intense. Reflecting the depth of her connection to the notes, some people in the crowd began to show visible signs of emotion. A few eyes glistened with unshed tears, and small smiles appeared on lips that had been pressed tightly together in concentration. Even those who had been doubtful earlier could not hide their growing admiration. The music spoke in ways words never could. reaching into the hearts of listeners who were experiencing something rare and beautiful. The piano, once just an object on stage, had become a bridge between her and the world around her. She remembered the countless nights she had spent practicing alone. When no one believed in her talent, she had played on broken keyboards and old pianos, sometimes for only herself, sometimes for the hope that someone would notice one day. The memory of her struggles gave weight to her performance, giving the notes an emotional depth that could not be replicated. Each key pressed carried her history, her perseverance, and her unwavering love for music. As she continued to play, the melody shifted and grew. She introduced subtle variations, small twists and turns that added texture and complexity. She experimented with tempo and dynamics, allowing the music to breathe and flow naturally. The audience was captivated, drawn in by the honesty and authenticity of her performance. No one had expected this from someone so unassuming, and yet here she was, commanding attention without words, without fanfare, with nothing but her talent. Her hands moved quickly but gracefully, each finger striking the keys with precision and care. She could feel the resonance in her bones, the vibrations traveling through her body and amplifying the emotions she wanted to convey. This was not about perfection or technical skill alone. It was about feeling, connection, and communication. Every note had a purpose, every pause a meaning. She was telling a story, one that transcended language and touched the soul. Some audience members began to exchange glances, silently acknowledging the power of what they were witnessing. A woman in the front row whispered to her companion, unable to contain her amazement. A man in the back shifted in his seat, leaning forward as if trying to absorb every sound. Even the organizers, who had been cautious earlier, watched intently, their expressions betraying a mix of surprise and admiration. The music had captured them all, breaking down walls of doubt and expectation. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music guide her completely. In that instant, nothing else existed. The audience, the hall, pressure of time, only the piano and the sound she was creating. The notes flowed effortlessly, carrying a story of perseverance, hope, and resilience. She felt a sense of liberation, a release of tension that had built over years of quiet struggle. For the first time, she was fully present, fully alive in her art. The melody grew louder, filling the hall with its richness and warmth. She experimented with contrasts, alternating between gentle, tender passages and strong, commanding chords. The audience responded unconsciously, leaning in, holding their breath, letting the music envelop them. She could feel the energy in the room, the collective heartbeat of listeners synchronizing with the rhythm of her playing. It was an unspoken connection, shared experience that words could never capture. Her mind wandered briefly to the small victories that had led her here. Mastering a difficult piece alone, overcoming frustration and doubt, staying committed when recognition seemed impossible. Each challenge had strengthened her. Each failure had taught her patience and resilience. The piano had been her constant companion, never judging, always listening, always allowing her to express herself. Now, after years of quiet effort, she was finally sharing that gift with others. As the piece progressed, she began to notice the subtle reactions in the audience. People were leaning closer, their eyes wide with fascination. Some had tears forming, others were nodding subtly in appreciation. It was as if the music had unlocked something inside them, something that went beyond simple enjoyment or entertainment. They were feeling her journey, her emotions, her truth. This realization added another layer of meaning to her performance. Reinforcing the power of what she was doing, she continued without pause, letting the music flow naturally from her hands. Each phrase was carefully shaped, each chord intentionally placed. She was fully immersed, fully committed, and fully connected to the piano and the audience. The room was silent except for the music, the collective attention of everyone focused on the unfolding performance. It was a rare moment of pure engagement, one that would linger in memory long after the last note faded, as she reached the final section. She allowed the melody to slow and soften. The intensity of earlier passages gave way to a gentle, lingering conclusion. She held the last note slightly longer, letting it resonate through the hall, and then released it, allowing silence to fill the space. The effect was profound, leaving the audience in awe, momentarily speechless. As if they had been transported somewhere beyond the ordinary, she opened her eyes slowly, taking in the faces before her. There was a mix of surprise, admiration, and quiet reverence. People were clapping softly at first, then more enthusiastically. As the applause grew in recognition of the talent they had just witnessed, she stood slowly, her heart pounding, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment and connection. This was more than validation. It was proof that her passion and dedication had found a voice. The organizer approached her, a small smile on his face, and nodded in acknowledgement. His earlier doubts had vanished, replaced by respect and appreciation. Some performers whispered to each other, clearly impressed and inspired by what they had seen. The audience remained attentive, as if reluctant to let the moment end. She felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that she had communicated something meaningful, something that could not be measured by technical skill alone. Backstage, she allowed herself a moment to breathe and reflect. The adrenaline was slowly fading, leaving behind a sense of peace and fulfillment. She knew that the journey was far from over, that there would be more challenges, more doubts, and more moments where courage was required. But she also knew that she had taken a significant step forward, that she had proven to herself and to others that talent, passion, and dedication could break through barriers and touch hearts. She thought of the small piano at home, the countless hours of practice, and the quiet determination that had brought her here. Every struggle, every failure, every moment of doubt had led to this point. The music she had played was more than a performance. It was a declaration of resilience, a statement that her voice mattered, and that her love for music was undeniable. The connection she had created with the audience was fleeting but real, and it left a lasting impression that would remain with her long after the applause faded. She walked slowly away from the piano, feeling the weight of her experience settle comfortably around her. The hall had returned to its normal rhythm, but the memory of what had occurred lingered in the minds of those present. She had transformed 10 seconds into something extraordinary, and now she was ready to continue her journey, carrying with her the knowledge that her music could move, inspire, and connect in ways she had always hoped for, but never fully believed possible. The room seemed to hold its breath as she turned backstage after her performance. Her heart was still racing, and her hands tingled from the energy that had flowed through them while playing. She had experienced something extraordinary, yet she remained humble, quietly absorbing the impact of what had just happened. The audience's reaction had been more than she ever imagined. Faces that had once held doubt were now full of admiration and wonder. The experience was more than applause. It was a recognition of the years she had spent honing her skill, the patience she had practiced, and the resilience she had shown. She leaned against the wall for a moment, closing her eyes. The memory of the piano's resonance filled her mind. Every note she had played, every chord that had vibrated through the hall, was still alive in her senses. It was a feeling she had chased for years, that moment when the music took over completely, connecting her to everyone in the room without a single word spoken. She had found a voice that could be heard without needing validation, and it was both liberating and powerful. In the audience, people were slowly returning to reality, but the air was still charged with the emotion she had stirred. Whispers floated across rows of seats, some expressing amazement, others curiosity. A few people exchanged glances, silently acknowledging that they had witnessed something rare, something that could not be forgotten. Her music had moved them, touched something deep inside, and they did not know exactly how to describe it. They could only feel it and hold on to the memory. She walked toward the hallway leading out of the hall, her steps steady, yet cautious. The thrill of performing lingered in her chest, but there was also a sense of vulnerability. Sharing something so personal left her exposed. Yet the response she had received reassured her that taking risks was worth it. Her mind reflected on her journey, the countless hours alone with her keyboard, the nights spent practicing until her fingers ached, the moments of doubt when she had questioned whether it was worth continuing. Every struggle had led her here. Every sacrifice had found its purpose in this fleeting yet powerful moment. She noticed a few organizers approaching her, their expressions softening. Earlier, they had been skeptical, worried about allowing an unknown performer to take the stage. Now, their demeanor had changed, respect replacing hesitation. One of them offered a small smile, nodding as if to say, "Well done." She acknowledged it quietly, grateful for the recognition, but more aware of the personal triumph she had achieved. This was not about validation from others. It was about honoring her own journey and sharing it with the world. Her mind wandered back to the faces in the audience, to the expressions that had shifted from doubt to awe. Some had leaned forward as if drawn by the music. Others had closed their eyes, letting the sound reach them deeply. She could almost feel the emotions that had passed through them, the subtle energy that connected her performance to their hearts. It was a reminder that music was more than sound. It was a medium for connection, understanding, and empathy. She had experienced that power firsthand, and it left her both humbled and inspired. As she walked slowly through the backstage area, she reflected on the responsibility that came with this newfound recognition. Talent alone was not enough. It required dedication, humility, and continued effort to make the most of it. She had seen glimpses of what she could accomplish, and it motivated her to push further. To continue refining her skills and sharing her music with sincerity, she knew that the journey would not always be easy. The rewards of moments when she could touch lives with her music were immeasurable. The echoes of the performance still lingered in the hall, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Each step she took was grounded in the knowledge that she had proven something important, not just to the audience, but to herself. She had taken a leap of courage, and it had paid off. The feeling of accomplishment was not fleeting. It was a foundation upon which she could build, a reminder that persistence, passion, and authenticity were powerful forces. She paused near the door leading outside, taking a moment to breathe in the quiet before stepping into the next phase of her day. The sunlight streaming through the windows reminded her that life moved forward, that opportunities and challenges awaited beyond this hall. Yet, she carried with her the confidence and clarity gained from the experience, a sense that she could face whatever came next with determination and grace. The applause and recognition were temporary, but the lessons learned and the connections made would endure. In the audience, the impact of her performance continued to unfold. Some individuals were inspired to pursue their own passions, reminded that dedication and courage could create moments of profound beauty. Others reflected on the importance of recognizing hidden talent, understanding that appearances and assumptions often conceal extraordinary ability. Her music had sown seeds of awareness and admiration. Leaving a mark that extended beyond the immediate experience, she thought of the small piano at home, the worn music sheets that had traveled with her, and the countless hours of solitary practice. The journey had not been glamorous or easy, but it had been real, authentic, and deeply meaningful. Each note she played was a testament to that journey, and the acknowledgement she had received, though unexpected, felt like a natural outcome of her dedication. She understood now that her perseverance had shaped not only her skill, but also her character, instilling patience, resilience, and a deep appreciation for the power of music. As she stepped further into the quiet hallway, I felt a sense of calm determination. She knew that future performances would bring new challenges, new audiences, and new expectations. Yet she was confident that her love for music and her commitment to authenticity would guide her through whatever lay ahead. The experience of connecting with others through her performance had reaffirmed her purpose, reminding her that true artistry transcends technical skill and touches the human soul. She paused for a moment, reflecting on the fleeting nature of moments like these. The applause, the admiration, and the awe were temporary, but the experience had changed her. It had reinforced her belief in the importance of courage, vulnerability, and persistence. She understood that every performance, no matter how brief, had the potential to leave a lasting impact, not just on the audience, but on herself as well. The realization filled her with quiet pride and renewed motivation. The hall gradually emptied as the next set of performances began. She found a quiet corner to sit and reflect, her mind replaying the sequence of events, the reactions of the audience, and the emotions she had experienced while playing. Each memory reinforced the significance of what had just occurred, a reminder that dedication, practice, and authenticity could create moments of genuine human connection. The experience had been transformative, and she knew it would continue to influence her approach to music and life. She smiled to herself, a small, contented expression that reflected the depth of her satisfaction. The journey had been long, the challenges many, and the doubts frequent, but this moment affirmed that every effort had been worthwhile. She had taken a step forward, not just as a musician, but as a person committed to expressing her truth and sharing it with the world, and leaving an impression that would endure. As she prepared to leave the hall, she felt a sense of anticipation for the future. There would be new challenges, new opportunities, and new moments of vulnerability. Yet the experience she had just lived would serve as a foundation, a reminder of what was possible when courage, passion, and dedication converged. She understood that the journey was ongoing, that the piano would continue to be a companion, a confidant, and a means of expression. The moment had been powerful, but it was only one chapter in a continuing story of growth, discovery, and connection. She stood near the exit of the hall, taking a moment to let the experience settle in. The hum of conversation floated around her, people sharing their impressions, voices soft and full of curiosity. She had always dreamed of moments like this, yet the reality was more profound than she had imagined. Every feeling she had carried into the hall, the nerves, the hope, the uncertainty had transformed into something lasting and tangible. It was no longer just about playing the piano. It was about the connection she had created, the impact of expressing herself with honesty and courage. Walking slowly through the hallway, she reflected on how the room had changed while she was on stage. Faces that had been doubtful were now filled with awe and respect. The subtle energy of the audience had shifted, a quiet recognition that talent can come from unexpected places, that perseverance and heart matter as much as skill. She realized that the 10 seconds that had seemed so brief at first were enough to leave a lasting impression, proving that moments of courage can ripple far beyond the instant in which they occur. Her thoughts wandered back to the journey that had brought her here. Years of solitary practice, evenings spent learning from worn sheet music, nights of frustration and quiet determination. She had experienced doubt, setbacks, and missed opportunities, yet every challenge had contributed to her growth. Every note she had played in the past had been a step toward this moment, a preparation for sharing her inner world with others. The memory filled her with a quiet pride, a reassurance that effort and persistence eventually lead to meaningful outcomes. As she made her way through the hall, she noticed people still looking at her, their expressions a mixture of admiration and curiosity. Some whispered softly, others nodded in quiet acknowledgement. She felt a sense of humility as she realized that her performance had affected more than just her own sense of accomplishment. The audience had been moved, inspired, and perhaps even challenged to consider the power of talent that appears in unexpected forms. Her music had created a moment of shared humanity, and that realization brought a warmth she could not fully describe. She paused for a moment near the staircase, allowing herself to breathe deeply. Her chest rose and fell slowly as she processed the experience. The adrenaline that had accompanied her playing was fading, leaving behind a steady awareness of what had just occurred. She understood that this was a beginning, not an ending. There would be more performances, more challenges, and more opportunities to share her gift. Yet the first step had been taken, and it had been significant. The knowledge that she had inspired and touched others, even briefly, gave her confidence for what lay ahead. She thought about the small piano she had practiced on at home, the worn keys and faded notes, the quiet room where she had poured her heart into music without anyone noticing. All those moments, all those silent efforts, had led her here. The struggle, the patience, and the quiet persistence had shaped not just her skill, but her character. Music had been her companion, her teacher, and her voice, and now it had allowed her to connect with others in a way that was deeply human, immediate, and unforgettable. Her mind wandered to the responses of those around her. Faces she had not expected to care were now filled with admiration. Performers who had once been focused solely on their own presentations were quietly observing, perhaps reflecting on their own journeys. Organizers who had hesitated to allow her a moment on stage now recognized the significance of her talent. She did not seek validation, but it was undeniable that the impact of her performance had extended beyond her personal experience. Music had created a bridge, linking hearts and minds in a shared, silent understanding. As she approached the exit, the cool air of the evening greeted her. She felt the contrast between the warmth of the hall and the crispness outside, a reminder of the world beyond the stage. Life would continue, as it always did, yet she carried with her a profound sense of purpose. The applause, the admiration, and the recognition were transient, but the confidence, courage, and connection she had gained were lasting. She knew that moments like this were rare, yet they were possible when effort, passion, and bravery intersected. Walking along the quiet street, she reflected on what she had learned about herself. Courage was not about the absence of fear, but about acting despite it. Music was not about perfection, but about sincerity and expression. Talent was not defined by visibility, but by dedication and heart. She realized that she had grown in more ways than one, gaining not only confidence in her abilities, but also a deeper understanding of how to communicate, inspire, and connect with others through her art. Her thoughts returned to the 10 seconds that had sparked so much reaction. It had seemed a brief, fleeting opportunity, yet it had held the power to transform perception, to bridge the gap between doubt and recognition, and to affirm her own worth. She understood that life often provided such small windows of possibility, moments that could change everything if met with courage and preparation. She had seized that moment, and in doing so, she had proven that the smallest opportunities can hold the greatest significance. She paused at a corner, observing the city lights reflected in puddles on the street. The world moved on, people passed by, and life continued, but she felt a sense of permanence in her experience. What she had shared, the emotions and connection of that performance, had left an imprint. She could carry it forward into her next challenges, her next moments of expression, confident in the knowledge that her voice mattered, that her music could move, inspire, and touch others. As she walked home, her mind replayed the hall, the piano, and the audience. The memory was vivid and alive, a source of energy and motivation. She thought about the future, about opportunities yet to come, and felt a quiet determination. She would continue to practice, to grow, to perform, and to share her music, knowing that each effort had the potential to create moments of beauty and connection. The experience had been transformative, and she was ready to embrace whatever came next with courage and passion. Arriving home, she placed her bag and music sheets carefully on the table. The familiar surroundings welcomed her, yet they felt different now, infused with the memory of her achievement. She sat quietly, reflecting on the day, on the impact of 10 seconds, and on the power of persistence, courage, and dedication. Music had always been her companion, and now it was also her testament, her voice, and her proof that authenticity and heart could resonate far beyond expectation. She allowed herself a quiet smile, feeling a sense of closure and fulfillment. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had brought her to a moment of connection, recognition, and personal triumph. She understood that the path ahead would continue to challenge her, yet she also knew that she was capable of meeting those challenges with skill, courage, and authenticity. Music would remain her guide, her friend, and her voice. As she continued to navigate life with purpose and passion, as night fell, she sat at the window listening to the city around her, feeling the echoes of the performance still present in her mind and heart. The experience had transformed her understanding of herself and her art, reinforcing the belief that talent combined with dedication and courage could create moments of genuine impact. The 10 seconds on the piano had become more than just a brief opportunity. It had become a defining moment, a source of inspiration, and a reminder of what could be achieved when one dared to share their gift with the world. With a sense of peace and anticipation, she finally rested, knowing that the journey of music, courage, and human connection would continue. The story was far from over, but the chapter of 10 seconds had already left an indelible mark, both on her and on those who had witnessed it. And in that realization, she found a deep, enduring joy, a sense of purpose, and a quiet readiness to embrace the next moments that life would bring.